Okay, so this is video to lecture number 6, and we're going to talk about some of the theories about why people are poor. In this part of the module, I don't know if I've put it above it or below it, but there's going to be a story about Tammy, and Tammy is an illustration of what typical American poverty looks like. She's a single mother. She lives in rural Ohio. She has limited education, and what I hope or part of my goal for introducing you to Tammy is to invite you to consider the different explanations about why people are poor. And I hope when you watch this, I think it's 10 minutes or so about Tammy, hopefully you can see both of the explanations, right? Now, again, sociologically speaking, sociologists claim that there's no such thing as the individual. The emphasis is on the social structure. So when you learn about Tammy, look for how she has responsibility for her, like what she has responsibility for her situation. But I really am hoping that you can see, that you emphasize, that you look closely for the structures, for how society has made it difficult for her to escape from poverty. And I think that's the way I've set that assignment up, is I ask you to identify both of those characteristics, right? So let me explain what that means. Let me explain what we mean by structural explanations and individual explanations. Hopefully by now you kind of got it a little bit, right? So I'm going to start with structural because it's the sociological emphasis. What the structural explanation of poverty says is that people are born into the structure somewhere, and there's something about the structure. There's something about where jobs are, where transportation is available, where training is, what wages are, that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to escape poverty. That the structure itself, the jobs that are available, the wages that they pay, the price of housing, all of this creates poverty and makes it difficult for people to move about, to change their location, right? There's not enough jobs, wages are not high enough, people don't have access to training, there may be limited public transportation, a person may have an emotional or an intellectual disability, means they can't get access to jobs, they may not interview people. I know one of the things that I became very aware of in my recent search for jobs when I was working like retail and such was that they would say, it'd be a big sign on the door that said we're hiring, but they never called me. The way people, and what I saw when I would get one of these jobs is that people would walk in, and if they knew someone, they would get an interview. But if you went through the process of applying online, you didn't get an interview. Right? In some cases, you may have had a felony conviction at 18, you're 40 years old, and that felony conviction follows you around. That's a policy, right? That's a structure. Missouri passed a law, I think, not very long ago, called Ban the Box. And that meant that that it's against the law in Missouri to have the little box on the application. Have you ever been convicted of a felon? Because the application is part of the structure, right? That it says that if a person won't even get an interview if they check the box. Now, they can ask you that question in an interview, but you at least get to that part, right? It's sort of like you get in the door. And if you think of jobs as a structure, you get closer to getting a job. The individual explanation says that and again, there's some overlap here. The individual explanation says that the reason people are poor is because there's something wrong with them. Now, it might be that they have limited job skills, but the structural explanation says they have limited job skills because they can't get access to the jobs. They can't get access to the training. The individual explanation says they don't have job skills because they're dumb, they're lazy, there's something wrong with them. And so it's the so what, the why do we care about what's the right answer? or what the best explanation is how we fix the problem. If this is something we want to fix, if it's an individual response, if poverty is an individual, then you have to try to change individual people. And you have to try to get them to motivated or whatever. If it's a structural explanation, then we create a society, right? This is where you get into sociology is about everybody else and blaming everybody else. Then we as a society have to create a system, have to create a structure where it's easier for people to get in that door, right? Where it's easier for disabled people. If it's an individual, then you kind of sit back and say, well, it's all their fault, right? They're lazy. I don't know how you fix lazy, or as my husband likes to say, you can't fix stupid, right? If it's structural, then you have to change the system. Then we, the system, the teachers, the administration, society has to change so that those people can access it. When it's the individual, it's what we call blaming the victim, right? They're a victim of poverty. So they brought it upon themselves, right? They may have mental health issues. That's their own problem, right? But nonetheless, okay, so those are fundamentally the two differences. So when you look for Tammy, look for things that the structure has made it difficult for her. How could society change that would make it easier for her not to be poor? Also look for aspects of her personal self, right? That if we're different, she would be less likely to be poor. Okay, I hope that makes some sense. This is a very important idea, the structural explanation. And the reason it's important is that as social observers, as social agents, meaning actors within society, how we explain the problem predicts how we fix the problem. When it's an individual problem, then that person's responsible for changing. It's not me, not my fault. Nothing I can do. When it's a structural problem, then as a participant in the structure, then it's more complicated, right? It's more complicated, but it also means we're all responsible for it. We all have a role to play in making it easier for poor people to escape poverty. Okay. Here's a new slide I haven't actually used before, but this is called the Horatio algebra. I think I said that right. The Horatio algebra myth. And Horatio was an author, and he wrote in the 19th century, and he wrote a series of books, and he had these various characters, but the message, the theme in all of these books was the same, and they were all these rags to riches kinds of stories. And the Horatio algebra myth is the myth that America is this place where anyone can succeed. If you work hard enough, if you're smart enough, anyone can get ahead. And what sociologists argue is that's really a myth. That's not really true. And what's also interesting, and I want to kind of highlight this, is what the research tells us. So this is a series of books that he wrote, right? And all the theme was the same. But what's also true is that Americans believe, most of us believe that people have an above average chance of being successful, right? But here's the thing, we can't all have an above average. Some of us have to be average, and some people have to have a below average. That's how you come up with an average, right? Everyone can't be above average. We all can't. And the same thing with like intelligence and attractiveness, right? To be above average means that there's some people who are below average. That's how you get it an average. And it's simply not true. Some people will be successful and some people won't be. Some people will, that's sort of what that means. But I have other examples, like to make the point that this message, that the cultural lesson of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, keep your eyes on your own work. I mean, this is rampant throughout our culture and throughout our cultural entertainment. And so I've just put some examples here, and it'd be cool if you want to add some other examples of just some quick ones that came up off the top of my head, like the movie Pursuit of Happiness is based on this sort of, now in that story, he actually gets lucky a couple times, right? It's not just his hard work. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Slumdog Millionaire, the movie of Rocky, you just work hard enough, the story of Forrest Gump, the story about, those are fictional, but so are Horatio Alger, the story of the social network, right? These are examples of and their entertainment, right? Because that's most of us don't have that experience. But as an agent of social control, going back to the chapter on socialization and the chapter on deviance, the media is an example of our socialization and our media, the books we read, our literature, the movies we watch and think are good. These all tell us how the world is, how the world and how we are supposed to behave in the world, right? And it's part of our collective social consciousness. And that, friends, ends the chapter on social class. And I appreciate your attention, and I will see you in the next chapter.